Hmm?
I like his hat.
Hmm. Yeah, he's terrific. That's Jason Mraz.
I like it.
Goes perfect with what I want to speak about today. I'm good. So good morning and welcome to the Center for Spiritual Living Space Coast. My name is Reverend Dr. Ron Fox, and we're glad to see people here on Zoom. And I know there'll be like 30 or 40 people watching during the course of the week. For those of us here, this would be a good time to turn your phone off or put it on manner mode, I think it's called. If you've never been to a Center for Spiritual Living before, we believe there's one God, many paths to that God, and we're here to love, honor, and support you, no matter what your divine path is. And the Center for Spiritual Living Space Coast is a safe haven for people of all beliefs and lifestyles, whoever you are, and wherever you find yourself on your journey of faith, you're welcome here. This morning, our practitioner is Reverend Jenna. I'll be the reader. So actually, I have a few announcements. The book group continues to meet on Tuesday at 2 p.m. on Zoom. And we're doing the 4 agreements. This week, we're going to do the 3rd agreement, but it's not too late for anybody who wants to come on. And, you know, it's a discussion group. So we welcome anybody to come on. Saturday, July 16th at 10 a.m. the Socrates Circle group is going to meet in here. So is that this coming? Yeah, it is. This coming Saturday at 10 a.m. We're going to meet here. And again, everybody's welcome. And all our classes are done on a love offering basis.
I think everything's going to be moved into the next space.
Oh. So on Saturday, the 16th, we're going to meet live, but we're going to be meeting in our new space down the hall. Thanks, Beck. Also, one other class that I wanted to talk about, one of our practitioners, Patrice Rivera, is doing a 3-part class on exploring the inner wisdom of our body. She's done the first class. The next, and each of the classes are on the 3rd Wednesday of the month. And the next one is July 20th, which is going to be a week from this Wednesday. And Patrice says participants will explore with gentle yoga. Patrice is also, besides being a practitioner, a yoga and meditation instructor, and she promises any and all bodies can participate. And then on August 17th, she's going to have another class where participants will explore using the medium of art. She said no skill is required, that's me, and even experienced artists may enjoy the class. Next week, next Sunday is Unexpected Income Sunday. So please set the intention that unexpected income will come into your life. You know, a tax refund you didn't expect, somebody buys you lunch or dinner, takes you to a movie, that's unexpected income. And what we do on the 3rd Sunday is invite anybody that wants to come up, tell us about their unexpected income, and then donate some to us. There's a board meeting today. We usually meet the 1st Sunday, but because of July 4th, we're going to meet today. And because of that, we're not going to do the after the service discussion, because besides the board meeting, we want to clean out the other room. So tomorrow at 10 a.m., as many of you as can, please come, because we're going to do the move tomorrow. I know we've got 6 or 7 people, but the more hands, the quicker it will be done. Last thing, we have a ministry of prayer here where we have several of our practitioners, our 2 ministers, and some friends of ours who are either ministers or practitioners are honored to pray for a friend, a family member, yourself for 2 weeks. If you're here and you want to do it, there's a form in the bulletin that you can fill out, and we'd be glad to do it. And if you're watching us on Zoom or during the week, contact me, contact Reverend Jenna, or any of our practitioners, and we would absolutely be honored to do that. And I think for once I remembered all of the announcements. So we'll do another song now.
Let us take this time to go within. There is a divine harmony that flows through all life, that supports all life. It is a harmony of love, of support, of peace and joy. It is a harmony that exists under the undercurrent of all life, no matter what is going on in the human world. There is a love, a harmony, a power greater that supports and nurtures all of us. It's a power that we have access to with every thought we make. And so in this moment, let us choose to live in harmony. Let us make that thought one of love, of harmony, of goodness and joy. Let us choose to love and not hate. Let us choose to live in peace and not war. Let us choose to live in acceptance and not rejection. Let us choose to celebrate creativity, uniqueness, differences, instead of criticize and hate. Let us embrace the harmony of love that flows through all of us. It is only a thought away, and let us choose that thought to live in love, to live in harmony. And I bless each and every one of you who contribute your time, your talent, your resources to this community, to support it, to nurture it, to allow it to grow and serve, and to be a community of acceptance and love. And I bless Reverend Dr. Ron Fox, for I know his enlightened ideas and thoughts and words empower each and every one of us to make that choice to live in harmony, to live in love, to be the example of peace, acceptance, creativity, love, nurturance, that this world may be transformed into one of pure harmony. I give thanks for this, and I release it into the spiritual law of life, knowing that as I speak, it is done. And so it is.
Thank you, Reverend Jenna. So I am the reader today. And what I'm going to read is something that I wrote, for, a daily guide, actually in August of 2000. And it's titled Unity. And let me just say, in case there's anybody that's new to us, that Ernest Holmes, I'm going to quote him in a minute, was the founder of the Centers for Spiritual Living. So one of the great teachings that Ernest Holmes passed on to each of us is our oneness with spirit. This is the basis for all healing. The search for who we are and what we are begins and ends within ourselves. As we come to know and feel our unity with spirit, wonders, small and large, begin to demonstrate in our lives. Thomas Troward reminds us that the difference between God and us is one of degree and not essence. In other words, while we are not all of God, God is all of us. It always fascinates me how we find ways to create separation. We have a multitude of labels and characterizations for one another, yet the only labels that are truly descriptive are brother and sister, because we all emanate from the same source. Our differences are on the surface. Deep within, at the center of our being, we are one, now and for all time. Take some time this week to go into the stillness and reflect on the beauty and the diversity of our universe. Think of the majesty of spirit and how it brings such marvelous variety to our lives. Consider the colors, sounds, and textures found in nature, and then give thanks for the differences in color, sound, and texture found in our human family. As more of us begin to travel this path, perhaps we will heal not only our own lives, but our planet as well. So if you haven't gotten the message yet from the songs or from the reading or from Reverend Jenner's prayer, what I'm going to speak about today is remembering we are all one. And I want to begin with two quotes from Ernest Holmes. The first one is, "Who finds God in man will also find man in God." And the second one is, "The one who has a consciousness of joy will find joy. The one who sings will hear a song. The one who turns from evil will find good." So I was thinking this week, and I know this is going to sound very naive, so if you're cynical, you're not going to buy what I'm about to say, but there's really no problem that mankind faces, whether it's domestically or problems in our world, that people working together in love, kindness, and compassion can't heal, can't solve. There's really none. And again, I know that sounds really naive. And I'll just say to you, I have some prayers I do twice a day. And one of them, I pray for Vladimir Putin every day, that he will find the love, the kindness, the caring, and compassion that resides within him. And when he does, the war in the Ukraine will be no more. And when enough of us believe that, and enough of us do it, and enough of us has that consciousness of kindness, caring, love, and compassion, there's nothing we can't do, nothing. So Leo Buscaglia was a professor at, I always thought it was UCLA, but actually it wasn't, it was at USC. And one day, I've told this story before, so I won't go into it, but one day a student he was close to committed suicide, and it affected his life. And he started teaching about about love. And I read this week, I never knew this. He had in the 70s and 80s, he had videos on PBS, and they were the largest watched videos at the time on any PBS station. And so he talks about love, and he says we're all dependent on one another in ways big and small. And he said a word, an act can reverberate in large circles, like, you know, we see in a pond, and can touch people that have no idea, that in no way expect it. And he said, you know, we can't escape moving together and affecting whoever we encounter. So now I'm going to paraphrase this, okay? But in the Bible, somebody asks Jesus, what is the most important commandment? And Jesus says, the first one is to love God with all your heart and mind and soul. And the second one is to love your neighbor as yourself. And I thought this week, that's a really pretty clear and unambiguous command, to love your neighbor as yourself. There's no squeaking out of that. That's clear what he meant. So Eric Butterworth was a unity minister, and I always say this, I think he was the greatest New Thought teacher in our lifetime. And he tells a story in one of his books about a lady who was on the subway. And boy, as somebody who took the subway every day for college and graduate school, I get this. And the woman gets on the subway car, sees an empty seat, and moves towards it when somebody sends her flying. And she turns in anger at this woman, and she calls her an animal and other names that Butterworth didn't define. But later on, she's feeling kind of still angry, but she also feels guilty at how she lost her composure and called this woman names. But she asks, she says, what can I do when someone acts like that? How can I keep myself in the spirit of love and harmony? What's wrong with this world? And here's Butterworth's take on this situation. He said, first of all, it could happen with any kind of conflict. It can happen if somebody beats you out for a promotion at work. And he said, while the incident is external, obviously it's external, somebody sent her flying, he said, the reaction is our own. And our desire to retaliate is a reflection of our own consciousness. The desire to retaliate is a reflection of our own consciousness. And he said, think about this now. He said, so suppose the other person behaves like an animal. What do we gain by becoming one too? What do we gain? Think about that. By responding in the same way, it only escalates and could lead, to some really, really big issues. And he said, when somebody acts like that, they're disturbable. I like that. Never heard that word before. They're disturbable. And he said, if her consciousness had been one of loving, she would have reacted in a different way. So, we all need to feel and express love, and acts of kindness have the potential to heal. So let me give you two examples. And the first one I read about a long time ago, and it's about a young priest that's very new in the parish. And the priest that heads up the parish is away on vacation when the wife of one of their very active congregants passes away. And the young guy goes to visit the widower. And he sits there and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to say because he's really nervous. So he just sits with this man. He just bees with him. And after an hour or so, he leaves. And he leaves and thinks to himself, I didn't do a good job. I didn't do what a seasoned priest would do. And about a week later, he gets a note from this fellow saying how much it meant to him to have this priest sit with him and be with him. Just being is an act of caring and kindness. And the second incident is about a nun. And this nun, and I think she's talking to Jack Kornfield, who's a Buddhist teacher, and she says to him, every time I go visit my father, it's a difficult time. I go to visit, he sits in front of the TV watching football and drinking beer. What should I do? And Kornfield says, the next time you go visit your father, leave your habit at home and sit with him and drink beer and see what happens. And she gets back to Kornfield and says, it was the best visit I ever had with them. It kind of, the habit separates. And when she left that home and reached out in oneness, it was a great visit. We are in charge of ourselves, and we're responsible for what we experience in life. And when we have difficult situations, we can ask ourselves, what would unconditional love do in this situation? And then we can do it. And I don't want to stand up here and sound like it's always easy, because it's not always easy. And, Becky always tells me when we're driving and somebody cuts us off or does something, and I yell, she always tells me, they can't hear you. They can't hear you. Anyway, Stephanie Dowick is a writer. I think she lives in New Zealand. And she talks about this too. And she says, people are going to disappoint you and people are going to hurt you. But if that's what you focus on, then you're not going to have really successful relationships. She said, one of the things we can do is we can remember that we're all imperfect, us too. The people in our lives are, and we are. And we can see that most people are doing the best they can. And when we remember that, when we focus on that, our relationships become much more rewarding. Wayne Dyer wrote, "See the light in others and treat them as if that is all you see." So if, actually this morning on the way here, I mentioned to Becky that somebody I felt let us down in something we wanted. And, but then I said to her, this person has been so kind to us and so good to us. One little thing, we're not going to let it get in the way. We're not going to let it interfere with what we have. So I want to read you another quote, and I've taken bits and pieces of what this person wrote. So this is kind of a quote of several of his things. It's by John Donne, and I'm sure you're all familiar with it. He said, "No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Any man's death diminishes me. Therefore, never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." And again, Wayne Dyer said that what Donne is writing about, he's writing about the oneness of humanity, and that when we see ourselves connected to everybody else, it changes our viewpoint. We see things differently. We move from what is different about us to what we have in common. And so, three easy, well, maybe not easy, but three things we can do to share that is, the first thing, we can stop viewing ourselves as distant and apart. And I'm going to give you some examples in a minute. We can see God in everyone and everything, and we can stop putting labels on people. So probably some of you that know Becky and I are going to be sick of hearing about this, but I want to talk about our vacation in New York that for me was a real example of this. I have in my phone here, I put it in here because I was losing track. So we went to New York City for a week. And in here, and I can show you the examples, we spoke to people from 24 different countries, 24, all kinds of different people. And how we did it, every single time I heard somebody speaking a foreign language, I asked them where they were from. And then, like I was an ambassador, I told them, "Welcome to the US. I hope you have a good time." And it led to some really interesting, one day we were having breakfast and a group of Hispanic people walked in, and one of them had a Yankee hat on, and I had my Yankee stuff on because we were going to Yankee Stadium that day. So I asked him if he was a Yankee fan, and he made it clear he didn't speak English. But one of the women at the table did, and she came over, and we probably talked about baseball for 10 minutes because she was a Yankee fan, and they were from the Dominican Republic, and she worked for a very high level person in Dominican. So she knew every Dominican player that had ever played in baseball. It was such a great conversation. We went to Chinatown and we sat next to a young couple from France. And for most of the lunch, we would chat. Another day we had breakfast and sat next to a family from Scotland. And the other thing that to me was most touching, when I asked Becky what was her favorite thing about the whole trip, she said we took a cruise around Manhattan Island, and she said, seeing the Statue of Liberty. Well, I want to tell you about that. So we took this cruise. We were sitting alongside of a fellow from Spain, his girlfriend, his Asian American girlfriend, and there were three people, young men, sitting in front of us. And I asked them where they were from. They were from mainland China. When we passed the Statue of Liberty, and there were all kinds, in back of us, there were people from Germany. When we passed the Statue of Liberty, everything on that cruise, on the floor we were on, stopped. Nobody talked, and everybody that I could see stood up, including the guys from China, the Spanish guy, everybody. And it just spoke to me, I mean, China is supposed to be our enemy, but three guys and, touching our humanity, there is no enemy. We're all the same. Maya Angelou once wrote, we're all more alike than we are different. And that's, you really get to see that when you touch people one-on-one and leave the governments out of it, frankly. So Dennis Merritt Jones is a Center for Spiritual Living minister. And he wrote in one of his books that he was taking his dog, Mac Doodle, on a walk one night. And it was very bright. He said, in fact, I didn't even need my flashlight. And he realized that while the moon was really bright, the moon doesn't have light of itself. It reflects the light of the sun. And he said, what a metaphor for the interconnectedness of all of us. He said, people and animals have been looking up at the sun and the moon for untold millennia. And that says to him, and it does to me too, that we're all part of something that's much greater than ourselves. There's one other concept I want to touch about oneness, and that is forgiveness. And Piero Ferrucci, who's an Italian psychologist, writes in one of his books, and I think the book is here it is, I wrote it down, The Power of Kindness. And Ferrucci talks about a friend of his who asks people in her life, what is the most important thing in life? And the answer she gets are health, love, financial stability, answers that you'd kind of predict. But one day she asks her dad, and she says, what is the most important thing in life? And he said, forgiveness. And what makes that special is his entire first family was killed in the Holocaust. All of them, a little girl, his wife, everybody. And Ferrucci said, isn't it interesting that he can forgive? And not only that he can forgive, but he can say that's the most important value in his life. Becky and I, when we lived in LA, we took my youngest son to the LA Holocaust Museum. And after we went through, they had a special speaker there that night, afternoon. And she was a survivor of the Holocaust. I was in the School of Ministry, and I was doing a paper on forgiveness. So I went up to her after her talk, and I told her what I was, and I said, I want to ask you a question. And she grabbed onto my hand, and before I could say it, she said, I know the question. And I hadn't told her what my report was. She said, the question is, can I forgive? And I said, yes. And she said, of course I can. If I hadn't forgiven, the hate would have eaten me up and I'd be dead by now. You know, Ferrucci says or asks, what if all people, all natures, all nations, and all ethnic groups can forgive? He said, you know, the world would be filled with much more happiness and lightness. And the other thing is, people would know what it's like to live in the present moment. Ancient hatreds would be gone. So I want to tell you about Yitzhak as a way of ending this, because Yitzhak and his experience kind of talks to what I've been talking about. So Yitzhak was a survivor of the Holocaust. And he was liberated from the concentration camp and later on became a very respected research physicist. And then he got cancer. And so he was going on a retreat for people with cancer. And they were kind of touchy-feely and huggy. And Yitzhak would ask, he would say, what is this huggy? What is this love a stranger? What is this? But eventually, well, he would let people hug him, and eventually he would hug back. But his life, the way they explained it, is like he was a survivor, and it made him guarded. So he loved his immediate family, but there were a lot of strangers in his life. And so on the last day of this retreat, they were going around asking people about it. And they asked Yitzhak, how are you doing? And he said, much better. And the reason he was doing better is the day before, he had taken a walk and he had talked to God. And they said, so what did God say to you? And he said, I asked God, God, is it okay to love strangers? And God said back to him, Yitzhak, what is this strangers? You make strangers. I don't make strangers. So I'll just close with this quote from Teilhard de Chardin, who said, we are one, after all, you and I. Together we suffer, together we exist, and forever we'll recreate each other. So thank you for being here today or this week when you watch. God bless you, and I hope you have a great week.